seminar. I'm so excited every time I'm asked to speak about music therapy because so many people have so many different ideas about what it is. And I've only just started at Princess Margaret and at Kensington, but the program's been in the works for over a year, so we're trying to spread the word about it. I'd like to start with a really short video clip of a news piece that was featured on Global TV in the spring of myself with one of my former patients. So I'll start with that.
For a few moments, Toast Reed feels light and carefree.
Can you hear it?
It really elevates my mood, for sure. Just singing out and enjoying music with another person is so wonderful.
Toast is undergoing ongoing treatment for acute myeloid leukemia. She's here twice a week and is happy to let this be the soundtrack.
Let it be. Many patients actually find the music therapy session is helpful because it does help them come to terms or make sense with their physical suffering on a more spiritual, emotional level.
A recent review of 400 research papers shows music can have major health benefits, including lowering the stress hormone cortisol, boosting the immune system, and increasing pain tolerance.
In a couple of studies, in fact, people were given music to listen to or benzodiazepines, an anti-anxiety drug, prior to surgery, and the music caused a greater reduction in cortisol levels, that is stress, than the drugs did.
Music may cause neurons in the primitive part of the brain called the brainstem to sync with the beat, a slow beat leading to relaxation, a quicker beat to focus and alertness. SarahRose Black is on her way to becoming an accredited music therapist. She tries to tune into every individual patient's need and mood, even their breathing pattern, to help with relaxation, pain management, and anxiety.
Sometimes as soon as they hear a song or as soon as they hear music or someone's voice, it can trigger those emotions and open up a space for them to be able to communicate.
And it's not only for the patients. Staff at Palliative Care can also take part in sessions.
You work in a very sad place, so it takes your mind off of the stresses that you may face at work.
But hitting a drum, it's a way of almost releasing something that I want to say or that I have on my mind, and I can just pour it into the instrument, and the instrument reacts. So it can be a very satisfying, cathartic experience. It's a way to almost say something without actually having to speak.
Studies have also shown that music tends to be more effective when patients choose the music that they'd like to hear. It's unclear why or how the music works. Scientists want to find out if the beneficial effects are because the music helps provide a distraction, or it induces certain moods or feelings of bonding and social support, or something else. Some of you may know that in dentists' offices,
My apologies about the sound. Just got these internal speakers. Hi, welcome, come on in. Hi. I'm SarahRose. I'm a music therapist at Princess Margaret Hospital. Hi. So just a little sample of the work that I do, and that particular lady, Toast, was very generous to offer her time and participate in that. And that was back in April. She was an incredible woman. Unfortunately, she passed away in August, and I'll share a story about her as I go further into my presentation. I'm always so curious to hear people's initial ideas of what music therapy is, for two reasons. The first reason is everyone has such a different idea of what music can be as far as a healing mechanism. And it depends on your cultural background, your upbringing, your personal tastes, your exposure. And the second reason is people often think music therapy is this one specific thing as far as being institutionalized or in a healthcare setting. And I'm all about busting those myths. So I'm just curious for any reactions, any preconceived notions, any ideas of what music therapy is or who it's for.
My own experience has been limited, really working with, and minimally, with people with cognitive impairment. So I think that just learning about the whole breadth of it would be really interesting.
Fabulous. So yes, cognitive impairment, hello, welcome. That's a huge area for music therapy. Anybody else? Yes.
Yes, I imagined it as being a form of healing and to help people relax, and no matter what their struggles are or crisis that they're going through, the music can help perhaps calm the system down.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. Calming the system. Absolutely. Just looking for any ideas of what you think music therapy is or what you know music therapy to be. Any music therapists, by the way, in the room? I should ask. Any other populations that you know music therapy is particularly effective for?
I would say virtually every population, particularly for young children.
Great, yes, absolutely.
Movement for balance, for cooperation, being together.
Totally, totally, yes.
Did we already, somebody mentioned dementia? Or we,
No, but cognitive impairment, but yes.
yes, yeah. I volunteer and definitely just singing, not even, music therapy in any sort of, academic way, but just singing and music is absolutely the number one, I would say the number one thing that makes people happy.
Love
no
it.
matter where they are on the dementia continuum.
Love it, absolutely, yes. So it's just from this brief sample, music therapy is so many different things to so many different populations. A couple of key misconceptions that I hear, and I didn't hear it at all today, but sometimes people say, oh, music therapy, that's for people with, or kids with autism, or that's strictly for seniors. I hear that a lot. And while, yes it is, it's also for everyone in between. Anyone in the healthcare system who is struggling physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, such a huge range of options for music therapists. This is one of my favorite definitions. It's by Clara Callahan, who's a wonderful music therapist in Australia. And she says, music therapy is the creative and professionally informed use of music in a therapeutic relationship with people identified as needing physical, psychosocial, or spiritual support, or people who are aspiring to further self-awareness and ultimately increasing life satisfaction and quality. That's kind of our goal. Decided to highlight what I think are the key words in this beautifully written statement. So we're very creative, obviously, as artists and musicians, ideally, and it's a professional career opportunity as well. For a long time, I think music therapists had to volunteer, and while I think voluntary music is essential and so powerful, the actual field of music therapy is becoming now an allied health profession, and we are accredited in Canada and around the world by different organizations. Pretty soon we're going to be joining the College of Psychotherapists in Ontario, which is a new initiative, and we're going to be a part of that. Music. This is what distinguishes us from other therapies. We use music in a variety of ways, and music informs the therapeutic relationship. I often work on physical needs with patients, with residents. Psychosocial is probably the biggest area of need in the populations where I work, and spiritual, that comes up more often than not. And while I am by no means a spiritual care professional, these issues do arise, and it happens far more frequently than I could have ever imagined. So, and ultimately, we're looking at life satisfaction and quality of life. You're welcome to stop for questions at any point, but I will have time for questions at the end. So, specifically, my area is hospice palliative care. And when you go to school for music therapy training, you are trained in a number of areas, but I chose to specialize in hospice palliative. And within that client population, psychosocial needs, like I said, are paramount. So we found that music actually helps improve psychosocial adjustment and symptom alleviation. So when you're dealing with end-of-life symptoms, terminal illness symptoms, symptoms and psychosocial needs often go hand in hand, and music, specific elements of music can cater to specific needs. So we've got melody, harmony, rhythm, tempo of the music, instruments you use, the volume at which you use them, and the lyrics that you use can all be catered to the person you're working with, which is why I think it's so important to have a live therapist. Music therapists generally don't advocate for piped-in music in palliative care units for a number of reasons. You never know when music might trigger something negative in somebody, so if you just have piped-in music all the time, it could essentially be dangerous if someone is reacting in a poor way and there's no one there to support them. And when it's a live therapist working with somebody, you can, in the moment, adapt and cater to whatever that person needs at any particular time. So we touched on some of these as I asked you that question about your ideas of music therapy. It's used in so many different healthcare settings. It's incredible, actually. Some of the hospitals in Toronto where music therapy is prominent, Sunnybrook has an extensive music therapy program, particularly in the Odette Cancer Center and with the Veterans Center. St. Mike's has a music therapist in palliative care. Baycrest has several, including interns. Sick Kids has 2, and they're going to have 3 pretty soon. And now Princess Margaret Hospital has 1. Hello, no, come in, no problem.
Hi. I was just curious whether it was a struggle to get the hospital to actually invite music therapy as a profession. I know that when I worked in hospital, everything was very evidence-based, and I had to really prove the case. And I had discussed having a music therapist come in, but they said, it was too difficult. So I'm wondering whether the experience you had was positive.
Yes, it was. That's a great question, and it's an interesting story, I think, actually, how music therapy came to Princess Margaret. I'll speak briefly about that since we're on this topic. So as a student, I had to do an internship in music therapy, and there are a number of sites that are set up for interns, including Sunnybrook. Baycrest is a huge site, and there's a number of hospices as well. But I knew Princess Margaret had no music therapy, so I literally just found my way to a meeting with somebody, with Gary Roden, actually, who is an incredible psychiatrist. And he's the head of psychosocial oncology and palliative care at Princess Margaret. So I walked in and I said, here's who I am and what I do. And that's okay. If you'll let me do an internship, so unpaid, with a supervisor, I will essentially demonstrate how music therapy works with no request for a job at the end of it. But it kind of exploded once it started, and the referrals were just out of control because people really wanted this service. So it was a very, very positive experience. Having said that, I have colleagues who have had negative experiences trying to essentially prove themselves, which is a lot of pressure and a lot of work when it's one person in an institution. But there is more and more evidence coming out that music therapy, from a music medicine perspective, so actually looking at brain changes, is hugely beneficial, and then psychosocial evidence is coming out, left, right, and center. Like I said, once I started, I found that I couldn't handle all the referrals coming in, and I think that speaks to how great the need was and still is, particularly at Princess Margaret. Psychosocial support is in incredibly high demand, and this is part of Dr. Roden's work. Existential distress is a huge component of the suffering experienced by people with terminal illness or with cancer in general, from diagnosis right until either recovery or facing palliative care. I found, not only in the literature, but in my daily experience, pain was sort of a number one talked about complaint. Anxiety and depression were all very prevalent. And while there are great supports, I found on a daily basis these things came up and needed tending to. And there are some music therapists who actually showed in various studies that emotional and psychosocial support, including life review and legacy work, were highly beneficial for people within this client population. So when I say my client population, it's adults in oncology, so cancer care, so from 18 right until 98 or whatever the case is. And I see palliative care patients as well as patients who are in for treatment, for transplant or for chemo or for radiation, as well as we've just expanded to outpatients too, so people who are integrating back into the community or who are still living at home. So in hospice palliative care, music therapy is a complementary therapy. It's an allied health field, and it helps to achieve the aims, the traditional aims of palliative care, which include pain and symptom management, psychosocial emotional support, and comfort measures, things like that. There's another quote by O'Callaghan that I absolutely love. The invigorating and life-affirming properties of music can help people live until they die. And for anyone with any experience in hospice palliative care, this is difficult to achieve often when distress is great and people are walking a fine line between feeling like hopeless and hopeful. I actually think there's quite a bit of room for hope in palliative care. I think it's essential to focus on it. Hope in palliative care looks very different than hope in survivorship, but hope is essential in both. Excuse me. This is the million-dollar question. Well, how does it work? And for those of you who saw the global clip, they said, we don't really know how it works. Scientists are still trying to figure out why music creates these positive and sometimes negative, but mostly positive changes, physiological, emotional, etc. And I sort of base my work on this premise that music therapy acts as a channel for the expression of emotions. It's a vehicle, it's a way of expressing, and in psychotherapeutic context, that expression, that self-expression, self-awareness, and receiving validation from another is so healing and can be so effective and powerful. You can almost take the word therapy out of that. Music acts as a channel for the expression of emotions. Hello, welcome. I've just found so many great quotes. You could say it better than I could, so I'm just putting them up there for you. Music therapists bring relief to so many whose existential suffering in the midst of the chaos of a life-threatening illness has eclipsed their soul. And this idea of existential suffering, I just wanted to define it quickly. There's a lot of research being done at Princess Margaret in psychosocial oncology on this notion of existential suffering. And it's essentially defined as feelings of low self-worth, no meaning in life, struggling with finding purpose and value to daily activities, feeling like there's no reason to continue living. These are components of existential suffering. So we'll get into the nitty-gritty a little bit. The difference between a music therapist and a musician or a music educator, even anyone who's offering music, is that a music therapist, for the most part, always has clinical aims. So when I'm working with someone and I'm playing music, it's always with intention and clinical aims behind it. And I'll get into some examples of clinical aims in the next slide. I use 4 main modes of interventions for hospice palliative care music therapy. Music and life review is one of the main ones, other than pain relief through music. So music and life review can be a number of things. I've written songs with people about their past experiences. I've written songs with people who want to leave the music as a legacy for their family and friends. And also songs about just processing the experience of being in a hospital or a hospice. Often people have a number of songs that are meaningful to them in their lives. So you can, if you just think back, you know, what are the songs that were important to you at important times in your lives? Often music acts as a soundtrack for our daily activities, and when you look back over a number of years, you have this soundtrack that reflects your experiences, both good and bad. And hearing people's stories about music that's been meaningful to them is very powerful. So what I do as a music therapist is I actually categorize and write everything down and say, okay, here are all your important songs. Let's put the positive memories or the memories you want in your room with you on a CD. And I've had patients actually have these CDs played in their final hours, so they essentially have these memories. They say that hearing is sort of the last sense that you hold on to, the last thing that goes. So to have these songs played as you journey, as you transition, as you die is, well, I don't know, but I've heard that it's extremely powerful, and it helps family members too focus on those memories. Improvisation it's fascinating actually. People can improvise even if they are bedbound. I have small accessible instruments. I often ask people to use their voices if they feel comfortable, and sometimes people just offer words. I'll ask for, you know, what's on your mind? Just say a word, and then I use music to reflect that. So it's very improvisatory, it's in the moment, it's music for that person in that moment, created by myself and whoever I'm working with. And then when people don't want to participate actively, although I always think there's active dynamics, I will improvise for that person. Songwriting, I touched on briefly. I've had a lot of humorous songwriting, which I'll share an example of later. I've had some very heavily emotional songwriting, and I'll have an example of that as well. And then I came up with this concept of interactive listening. This was part of my research last year at Princess Margaret. I don't ever believe that the person on the receiving end of the music therapy dyad is inactive. I always think, even if they are actively dying, that there is still some interaction, because the therapist often picks up cues from the client, even if it's just breathing patterns. So I will follow someone's breathing pattern with the cadence of my music, if that's all I have to go off of. Eye movement, any kind of physical reactions. So those are my 4 main modes. Okay, so let's get to some music. I usually do live music, but I'm not going to today. I'm going to play an example. This first clinical aim for a woman, Angie, was to create a legacy for her children and leave her children with a message that they could carry with them for the rest of their lives. Angie was a 47-year-old woman who was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was metastatic, and she was in Princess Margaret's palliative care unit. Had no prior musical experience at all, and when music therapy was offered to her, she said, "I could try. I mean, I don't know, it's kind of out there." And I said, "No problem." So we actually did a lot of active playing together. She would play drums, she would play my keyboard, just you know, play around, explore, and I would play with her. And she told me, she said, "You know, I have this letter, and I don't know how to finish it or what to do with it, but it's a letter to my children." She had 3 children, a 27-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And she said, "It's a message to them. It's my hopes for them, my wishes for them. What should I don't know what to do with it." And I said, "Well, if you have the words, how do you feel about putting it to music?" And she said, "Well, I can't do that." I said, "Well, I can, and we can do it together, and it can be your music." So I will play you Angie's song. This is what we came up with. so we made 3 copies of 3 CDs, and each child has one. And she asked that this be played at her funeral, which it was. So that's Angie's song.
Should I try to sing that song?
No, I asked her if she wanted. She actually had a trach tube, so she couldn't speak very well, and she said, "I need you to sing it." I said, "Okay," and I still get emotional listening to it because it was so difficult to sing. And all of this, I should say, came together in less than 48 hours because I knew she was being discharged to a hospice, and so I mean, these things can happen very quickly if they need to with a music therapist there. So. Any questions? Thank you. She was amazing. Any comments or questions about that process?
So actually, with creating the song, were you with her as she decided on the words, or did she think about it for a day or two and give ideas? Did it grow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I was with her for a session, and she showed me a letter. This was a letter to her children. She had most of it written, but not all of it. Mm-hmm. And she read it to me, and so we decided on a theme to kind of finish the letter, and decided on a chorus, which was that "Stay Together," and those were her words. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know, if you need to change anything, you can do it tomorrow if you want. So, but what we did in that session was she would give me images. She'd say, you know, I imagine my child at this stage, and what would that sound like? And I would try something. And she would say, okay, a little bit more like this, or a little bit more. And she would use images and colors and feelings as opposed to chords and notes. And I was the one who had to kind of shape them into. And she asked me a few times, she said, not that way, try it again. So it was very much her process, which I wanted it to be, because while she couldn't play and couldn't sing, she directed my doing so. I'll just go through 2 more clinical aims, and I have lots of stories. I met with a woman who was in her 80s and at the palliative care unit at Princess Margaret, and she was there just for pain and symptom management, and we got to know each other, and she really enjoyed the music therapy. And then she was actually admitted to Kensington Hospice a year later. And in her final days, she was somewhat unresponsive, and her son would sit with her at the bedside and hold her hand. And so we decided that something that would be appropriate would be me improvising and playing for her, using my Tibetan singing bowl, which we don't have right now. But has anyone seen a Tibetan singing bowl? Yeah, I use that a lot in my work. It's this beautiful metallic bowl. It makes a beautiful resonant sound. And what I would do is I would just sing, like, just ah. I wouldn't use words. And I learned that her favorite song was Simple Gifts. Just a gift to be simple. And so I would use that melody and just improvise that melody, stretch it out depending on her breathing, and bring it back. And her son would sit with her, and it was silent but for the music. And we did this several times, and afterwards her son said to me, that was when I said goodbye. That was when I was able to, because I had a context for it, I had the music, I was thinking about, you know, my mom's favorite things and her personality. It wouldn't have been the same if it was just the 2 of us. I needed that music surrounding us. It was sort of a holding space. So the clinical aim there was providing that reflective, supportive space through the music for this gentleman and his mother. The last story I'll share is, for now, I love this story because I had one session with this woman at Princess Margaret, and she was so spunky, and I only saw her once because either she got discharged or I left for a while. Either way, we had one session, and she was a lot of fun, and she said to me, you know, I've had this dream. I've always wanted to be a jazz singer. I thought, that's so great. And she said, but I'm not a jazz singer at all. I'm a prof, and I don't sing jazz. And I said, well, what if we could make you a jazz singer just for this hour? And she said, well, that's nuts. And I said, well, I started to improvise on the piano. I had this little groove going. And I said, let's just imagine, you know, we're at a smoky jazz bar, and we painted these images. So it was a lot of music and imagery. And she said, yeah, okay. And you know, the drummer's over there, and she said, yeah, and then there are people over here. We essentially created a jazz bar out of her room. And it was just through her words and through the music. And I was trying to match what she was saying as I was playing. And then I started singing. And I just went do, 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 over and over again. And she jumped in. And we were singing this awesome duet. And it went on, it went on. And it was such a cute little ending. And she went do, do. And I went do, do. No words, right? Just the do-dos. And at the end, she said, I did it. I was a jazz singer. I did it. I said, there you go. It's your lifelong dream in palliative care. Who knew? So that was a really fun example of the power of one session and someone's imagination fueled by the music, I think, and by someone's desire to really engage in something like that as they're facing end of life. She didn't move from her bed. She sat there and sang. So I have these great stories, but I think the important thing that people at the hospital ask, okay, who benefits and how? I always say music therapy spans the trajectory of disease progression, right from the point of diagnosis through their journey, all ages, all stages. Like I said, there are pediatric music therapists and sick kids who are unbelievably busy, supporting right from neonatal up until 18 years old. And that's when I step in at 18 years old and up till any age. It doesn't matter if someone is unresponsive or if someone wants to run around. I mean, it doesn't really matter physically where they're at. Music can meet and match them. My 4 categories of people that I think of when I'm at the hospital are, number 1, the patients. Number 2, their caregivers and their families. Number 3, the staff who support them. And then the larger hospital community, which extends then to the broader UHN community. And I think music can penetrate all of these areas and be a glue that binds all these areas together. When we talk about patient-centered care, circle of care, you think of, all these parts. And I like to think of music as tying everyone in, pulling everyone together. This is Joel. By the way, I should say I have permission from all of these people to use all this info, these pictures, these songs. And his dream in palliative care was to play the saxophone again. He hadn't played for years. He was 31. And he said, I used to play. I was pretty good. But I haven't touched one in so long. I'd love to just even hold one. But that's crazy. That can't happen, can it? Apparently the social worker said, well, there is a music therapist, and if it's going to happen, talk to her. And so we did it. We got him a saxophone for the duration of his stay at Princess Margaret. And he played about 4 notes. And it was exhausting. I mean, for those of us who have tried a brass instrument, I mean, the amount of energy it takes. And he wasn't well, but he did it. He said, look, I just wanted to go out with a squawk. And I did. And he kept that saxophone in his room. And his family knew it was there. And it wasn't even, he didn't take it out, I don't think, after this one time. But knowing it was there and knowing that was such an important part of his life, you've got all sorts of benefits going on there. So I argue it for the distraction that music provides that takes the mind away from pain and symptoms, even just for a second, for a moment. It's still valuable. Then there's the supportive validation of the therapist, reflecting and engaging in whatever the person's experience is. Increased self-awareness, I would say maybe an example would be my jazz singer, who was able to kind of look at what was meaningful to her and what she wanted to do as she was facing end of life. Helping to adapt to have a saxophone in a hospital room like this, it can possibly make things just a little bit more comfortable. Anxiety relief, the anxiety levels are through the roof at Princess Margaret Hospital, and that's just the nature of the disease. But often music can provide that calming effect. I think it was you who said calming the system. I love that idea. Psychosocial support, I've talked about. Obviously, Angie's song. The aesthetic experience. Sometimes people just enjoy listening to the music for the aesthetic value. And expressions of grief and bereavement. For example, the gentleman who was with his mother at end of life. And music therapists do work in bereavement support. I haven't done a lot of that, but I plan on delving into that at some point. So holding bereavement groups for loved ones of people who've passed away, like maybe an 8-week group sort of thing, and using music to support them. There are so many family and caregiver benefits. They're often in the room during the session. One of my research participants from the winter of last year, the patient only spoke to me once, and then after that it was pretty much palliative sedation. But her daughter was the one who was always singing with me and engaged with me, and it was all directed at her mother. So we would sing together to this woman. And her daughter told me, she said, I don't know how I would have been able to do this by myself. I love to sing, my mom loves to hear me sing, but it's different when you're alone. Decreased anxiety, I think often bringing these positive memories. The family of Joel who saw the saxophone, I think that really brought them a lot of happiness and support. It also becomes, the room becomes a nonverbal space for families to connect with one another. Sometimes it's really hard to say words that need to be said. And if I can provide a musical landscape background, sometimes you can just be together without words. And then other times you can use the songs. For example, a song with the words I love you might be a little easier than just saying it. The family is singing the song. The family is singing a hymn. That's really important. So. Yes?
Are choirs ever used with therapy? Like as far as physical, the whole physical thing that happens in a group of people, I've found that there's a physical reverberation and that kind of healing. And I'm wondering if that is ever brought up in music therapy, or is it always quite single?
No, it's definitely a huge component. There have been a lot of studies on choirs and the effects. And, group music therapy is huge. So in a population where people are a little bit more mobile or are able to get into a group together, yes, there are like formations of choirs I've heard about. A colleague of mine actually started a staff choir at Grand River Cancer Center, so the staff get together and sing together for those reasons. So yes, absolutely.
That's the other circle of care thing where it benefits everybody and chills out.
Exactly. And healthy staff, better patient care, all these things, right? Absolutely.
Because I've sung with Alzheimer's patients who don't remember you from 2 seconds ago. And this woman knew every lyric of every song that was ever brought up. It was quite amazing, because she had a record player and that story came out. But yeah, a minute, if that was there a minute ago, she'd seen it. So it's also amazing benefits with music. But the choral thing, and even singing, gives a physical reverberation that happens, and that you experience, when you're singing it, they'll experience too.
Absolutely. I think it's quite natural and quite healthy too to have that energy. Absolutely, it's such a healthy thing. Yeah.
I would just to add to that, I was unfortunately at the dying family member, and the whole family had wonderful voices, and for 4.5 hours they stood around as their father and grandfather was taking his last breath, and the staff came in and the nurses came in, and by the end of the 4th hour that whole floor was singing, and then
That's incredible. It's that bringing together through music. That's so beautiful. Yeah. And we all know, caregivers can be extremely affected. They can be burnt out. They can have compassion fatigue. They can be struggling with, the trajectory of the future, right? Especially with a loved one who's dying. They're focused not only on the comfort of this person, but what's going to happen the next day. So any kind of support like that is huge. This picture is, it's from a wedding that took place at Princess Margaret on the palliative care unit recently, a couple weeks ago. And it was one of my patients who got married, and they'd been together for 35 years and thought, well, let's get married. And so they had a lovely wedding ceremony, and I played 2 of their favorite songs. And I like to think of that, the music as supporting all of their caregivers, that couple's caregivers who came from everywhere, out of town, nearby, to support them on their wedding day. It's another community aspect. You saw the drummers, for those of you who saw the global clip. So these are some of my drummers. I held a staff drumming group last summer for 8 weeks, twice a week. And it was a drop-in. People came from all over the hospital, and I rented these fabulous drums, and we just drummed our hearts out. And people said, I'm so relaxed, you know, I feel better. I feel like I just drummed out the day. And you know, that drum does react to you, and that's so satisfying. It builds community, it promotes, you know, coming together collaboratively in a non-work setting, which is great for staff members. And burnout and compassion fatigue are also rampant at the hospital. Again, no one's fault, just the nature of the disease and of our healthcare system. So I think it's extremely important to have things in place for staff. There are many, but staff often find it difficult to engage in them. So when they hear music on the unit, they're like, oh, okay, you know, there's something there for me to latch onto. This is a picture of a couple of us at the Weekend to End Women's Cancers last year. We were there again this year. And I like to think of music therapy and music in general as reaching out into the broader community and supporting the larger healthcare team and the larger circle of care. So now I'm thinking on an even bigger scale. I think there's really no end to the impact music can have, especially when it's done in numbers. For example, like your example. This is the happy couple in here, not married. And there's a whole bunch of us, including the occupational therapist, a couple of nurses, the nursing manager, a support person, music therapy, maintenance, psychiatry, like we're all there. And I like this picture because we're literally kind of sort of encircling this couple. And I think of music doing that as well. It looks at the whole team, from the patient to the healthcare worker to the whole unit. Just a couple of quick examples of interdisciplinary collaboration. On this side of the screen, you've got Catherine, an occupational therapist, and myself. And on the other side, a bone marrow transplant doctor, and myself. He's a pianist. And we would get together and do concerts on the unit for whoever was able to come out. The people on the bone marrow transplant unit are in isolation, so they can't leave the unit. Some of them can't leave their rooms. So for us to bring music in there was exciting for them. And Catherine and I do relaxation therapy together. She reads from a script, and she's trained in all sorts of relaxation therapy techniques. And then I provide live music to accompany her words. What she used to do was have a CD, and now we do live music so I can, again, adapt to whatever the patient is doing or feeling. So this is the psychosocial oncology floor at Princess Margaret. The pilot project was May 2012 to August 2013, so I've just been working there officially for a couple of weeks. And now we've expanded to outpatient sessions, which is exciting. It's very different than the inpatient world. And referrals come from all over the hospital, so not only physicians, but allied health, psychiatry, self-referral from patients. And just a couple of pictures of the unit. I'm not going to get into my research findings too much, just in the interest of time. But my primary finding was that there is interactivity and interaction regardless of the person's ability to verbally communicate. So music creates that space for interactivity. Is anyone familiar with the Kensington Hospice? It's a beautiful, beautiful space on Major Street, just down the street here. And we did a pilot program from January to July, and I'm also part-time there now. It's a 10-bed residential hospice unit, and I do very similar work to what I do at Princess Margaret. Things move at a different pace in hospice care than they do on the acute palliative care unit at PMH. But still, there's so much room for psychosocial support and for music therapy.
Is that an extension of Kensington long-term care?
Yes, yes. So Kensington Foundation looks over both of those. Yes. Kensington Hospice is only 2 years old, so it's quite new, quite beautiful. This is Tos, and this is the lady, for those of you who saw the global clip, this is her. And she was a phenomenal musician herself. So we sang a lot of songs together. She taught me a lot of songs. She and I would sing songs for other people on the unit. And we wrote a song together called Peace. And what those words ended up being were the back of her, I guess the program at her funeral. They put these words there. She based the words off of a Mother Teresa prayer. The fruit of silence is prayer. The fruit of prayer is a deep faith. The fruit of faith is love, a love that comes from God. And we created a song based on these words. She wrote out all the lyrics, sang a melody, I transcribed it, and then she asked that I sing it at her funeral, which I did. And that was just recently. So now I have some patient stories. This particular gentleman was quite an accomplished pianist, but had not played for quite some time as he was very, very ill. But when I said, you know, you have the opportunity, I can bring the keyboard right into your room. It doesn't even matter how long or what you play. If you want to touch the piano, you can. And he was a little hesitant, but he did. And he asked his son to bring in tons of sheet music, and he sat there and just did what he could. And he said it was exhausting, but it was a way for him to acknowledge and then say goodbye to that lifelong passion of his and enjoy it one last time. So this gentleman was on the bone marrow transplant unit, and we had done a whole bunch of different interventions together. He called me in one day. He said, I have an idea. I want to write a song. I said, great, I can facilitate that. That's great. He said, but it's a very specific topic. He said, it's about the call bells on the unit. He said, they drive me nuts. And they drive everybody else nuts. So we have to write a song about this. He said, about the bells, and you know the infusion pumps and the IV poles? He said, those things are going off, and I'm dreaming about them, and if I don't do something, I'm going to rip them out of the... I'm like, okay, let's write a song. So we did. And we called it the Bells of Ward 14B. It was based on the song Daisy Daisy. You know that old song? Yeah. So I wanted to sing you guys a little bit because I don't have an audio example today. The morning, the day, the evening, you'll always hear them pealing. Those angry bells, those GD bells of PMH 14B. Beep, 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 beep. We had so much fun with that. And what he said, well, we got to perform this. I said, yeah, but you can't go anywhere. He said, I know, but they can come to me. So there are daily rounds where the entire healthcare team goes, you know, door to door. And he said, okay, well, when they come in, perform. And sure enough, all these very serious physicians, you know, piled in. And I said, okay. I said, just stay here. We have something for you. And this guy was such a riot. And we started and we sang, and they didn't know what to do. They were just like, what's happening in this hospital unit? But it was really, really exciting for him, and to be able to create something like that. And he didn't have to go anywhere. I mean, we did it all in his hospital room. It took an hour, actually, to write the song. I love this quote. I was lucky to have it written down. Through your music, I have been able to find more peace, more acceptance, and more strength than I ever imagined I'd find here. I think I've begun my journey towards death, and your music is with me. And this was a resident at the Kensington Hospice. I hesitate to talk too much about, too many spiritual aspects of music. I think they're so immense and so beautiful that I haven't yet put words to what that experience is like, the spirituality of music. But I do believe that when someone is transitioning in those final hours, you know, physically I can't go with them, we can't go with them, loved ones have to stay here, but music goes. Music carries forward, and music carries on in ways that I don't know or will ever understand. But this is why I do what I do, and I think it's such an honor to be able to engage in music with people, all ages, all stages of disease trajectory. So, thank you very much. Thank you. I would love to have a dialogue now and answer any questions, hear any comments. Yes.
Oh. How do you go about linking with the community? I know you touched on that, but how does that look when you actually meet people off-site, or do you?
I don't meet people off-site at the moment. What I do is have outpatients come into the hospital. So we kind of tag it on to maybe their annual appointment or their monthly appointment, and they'll come and they'll see me. And we have a room on the psychosocial unit. But I am, in the future, going to be doing home visits with a physician who sees people with advanced dementia in their homes, in the community. So I'll go with him and sort of we'll tag tag team, I guess, and he'll do his visit, then I'll offer some music therapy right after, so it's in their home. Music therapists do a lot of work out in the community, much more than I do. For example, like the staff choir, they go out into the community as well and perform, so yeah. Yes.
I'm wondering about how you would approach the client who is, would probably benefit from some music therapy, but is very depressed, or, you know, says, I have no time for this, I'm dying, I have so many other things to think about. Like, how would you approach that?
So, I often suggest that people try it for a couple of minutes. That way it's non-threatening, and it's sort of like, if you like it, great. If you don't, I'm leaving, and you don't have to worry about it. And if people are really resistant, I just take my cue from them, and I say, okay, that's fine. You know, we don't have to do anything. But I might pop my head in the next day, just as a reminder that I'm there. I try and be as client-centered as possible, so if they're really resistant, I might just back off completely. But if I really feel that they'll benefit and they're resistant to me, sometimes it doesn't hurt to have their nurse kind of pop in and say, have you tried music therapy? Because if they hear it from someone else, they might be more open to it. It's possible. But often just offering a couple of minutes, just a kind of sample, is a doorway in. I've had people say, well, I like music, but I'm fine. Like, I'm totally fine. I don't need any, you know, emotional help. Fine. They'll say, so play something and whatever. And I'll play, and before I know it, they are sobbing, just sobbing. And, you know, and then that's the doorway in, you know. So. Yes?
Just an example, even without a music therapist, but you're fantastic, and the benefits of music.
Yes.
I used to send students out with dementia patients and Alzheimer's patients, and they would go out with song sheets that I had them for the old songs. The only problem was that the students didn't know these songs.
Yeah.
Like Daisy, Daisy, whatever have you. So we would always have a session in the class to learn the song, but when they got to their setting, wherever they were going, they would say to the clients, because they were usually in a room, you know, just relaxing, could you teach this to us, and could you help us with this? And so it went interactive the other way.
Oh, nice. Nice. That's fabulous. Yes.
Can I just ask you to flip that back? I lost the last half of the last sentence.
This one?
Yes,
yeah,
thank you.
For sure, for sure. Could I actually ask of you, just if you'd like, just share maybe your name and where, what you do, or maybe what brought you here, or just one little tidbit.
On this?
No, just verbally. We can go around.
Yeah. I'm Christina, and I'm a nurse that works in the palliative care unit at Toronto Grace Hospital. And obviously, end-of-life care and anything that's going to benefit end-of-life care and comfort is important to me. And we did have, for a very short time, a music therapist that worked with us quite a number of years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, but I do feel sometimes that rooms are so quiet and so still, and need some kind of underlying energy from music or sound or laughter or anything that can help those people with lower levels of consciousness or discomfort or any kind of pain and anguish to reach onto, to hold on to that. Yeah, so I think it's really been good and important. Love to have an intern come and apply at our place.
I love the way you articulated that there is that stillness.
Yeah.
Because I feel that too, and it's amazing, the first chord, and suddenly I feel my shoulders drop.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that music therapy is just exploding right now, and that like more and more people are applying to music therapy education programs. So I'm sure, I mean, that, you know, in time, that there will be a music therapist, if not more, at many, many facilities. Thank you. Do you want to keep just sharing your name? And
my name is Cindy. I volunteer at Toronto Rehab at the BMus Center in Palliative Care. and also volunteer and work with dementia clients. So I have more experience with music with dementia, but also in the palliative period, and I noticed exactly the same thing. It's so quiet. But there was a woman that I met and sat with. She actually was there for a number of months. But the last few months, I noticed that I went into a room and the staff had put on Jazz FM, and I discovered, I don't always know, because I volunteer there, I don't always know all the stories. Turns out she was a jazz singer and had been, worked in a lot of the clubs in Toronto, and that music just played, that station was on all the time, and obviously was a real comfort to her. So then I started talking to her about it. But I know what you mean. Otherwise, there is no music going on, so sometimes it's so silent. And I wondered about that. I'm glad to hear about this. I thought, is it because there just isn't any real music program, I guess, in this part of palliative care. So people might do it individually, but there's nothing that's going on a bigger scale.
Well, we have a station on TVs. If someone has a TV in the room, and it's a visualization, it's a therapeutic station. It's a loop.
Oh, okay.
And so it has little sound bites. It has little PowerPoint with some soft music that plays behind it. So sometimes I turn that on, especially at night, because the rooms are so quiet. And if you don't hear something, all you hear is like crash in the hall, or the nurses walking in, or the noise. Yeah. I mean, it's always important to speak, to have some, maybe it's just a one-way conversation.
Particularly for people in palliative who are still very much, some people spend quite a number of weeks or even months, who are very vocal and so on. And I've had that comment that they're very aware of all those other sounds at the hospital, and that can be quite disturbing. And they can sometimes hear the nurses, in the state can hear a lot of things going on, which sometimes there's no other distraction. You're really widely attuned to this.
Yes.
I think there's white noise machines, that kind of have babbling brooks and stuff like that. That just sort of like a fan, even the noise of a fan, that kind of thing, or forest sounds that you can sort of go into and
take away from that silence or from that other kind of jarring noises, which are not really welcome noises that you hear sometimes.
Certainly. Thank you.
I'm Rachel, and I don't work in palliative. Some of them. Tired of some people. We go to California, and in California, where we go, that community, there are three, not one, not two, but three very active groups of senior musicians. You have to be in your late 80s or 90s to get into this one. And I'm amazed how many blow wind instruments. And you can hear a soloist at 95. He had been a jazz musician earlier. Most of them had been professional musicians who had retired to these kind of snowbird communities. But it is astonishing. You can keep the musicality in your life apparently longer than you can compete, some other things.
It's a muscle, too.
It's the muscle and it was totally amazing how many. And so this idea that, unfortunately when you're in palliative care, but you're in the community before that, and it only took a minister in a community to organize these three groups. You put out the call and they come running. And it is such a fantastic thing to see the well elderly still using the music to keep themselves well.
Phenomenal. That's phenomenal.
And they can also give benefits to so many other people.
Exactly.
By doing what they want to do.
Exactly.
I love that. It's a beautiful story. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, my name's Trish. I'm a PhD student at the Faculty of Information and through the collaborative program at the Institute of Life Course and Aging. So I'm here, I'm really interested in just everything, I think, at this point. This sounded just fascinating, and it was. So I thank you for that. I'm hoping to maybe focus on dementia patients at some point, but
Fabulous.
it was really, really good. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, and all the best in your studies.
My name is Debbie. I worked as an occupational therapist. That I applied the music to was when people were exercising, so that helped try and set the mood in terms of kind of doing the exercise, but at the same time enjoying the music. And I think that that actually helped encourage people to stay on with their routine a little bit longer. And I guess the other thing that I tried to do was I would use or introduce, let's say, a song with lyrics and see if clients could share any kind of messages that they got from the musicians. So, you know, there would maybe be a life lesson in the song that a client could relate to, and then relate it to their own personal experience.
Oh, fabulous. Fabulous. That reminds me of a lot of work that's done in adolescent mental health. You know, using, for like, they'll play a song that might be on the radio currently, and like you said, like what do you take from that? Or doing lyric replacements, you know, changing certain lyrics to fit them to your own life. So that's wonderful. That's great. Oh, I've learned so much about occupational therapy in the past year. It's just amazing what you guys do.
Yeah, well, I wish that you could come on board more to other places. I hope hospitals become more with it, you know, in terms of accepting new kind of methods to help with healing, as opposed to the very traditional, formal kinds of methods that have been used in the past.
Totally. Well, between you guys and me, so right now, I'm the only in the first music therapist at UHN, which I find a little shocking, actually. Like, what do you mean there's no other music therapist here? But it's fine, because now my plan is to, in a couple of years, have interns and disperse them to all the UHN sites, etc. So keep your fingers crossed for me, because that would be exciting. So thank you. Hi.
I just finished the activation course in gerontology at George Brown, and the first year placement was with long-term care, and the second was within the community. And now I work with stroke survivors. But I also have was a jazz singer, and then got involved in big choirs in Vancouver, where I was never in a church choir or anything, so I came to it late. But that whole harmony thing and being in the middle of 80 people is sort of pretty crazy, you know. And we used to do outreach and go to hospitals and Christmas and stuff. But I always the music thing in long-term care was the best. And there's a couple things, like I think everyone's seen the iPad thing where the cognitive nonverbal guy just sort of wakes up, and for hours after listening to music is actually speaking for the first time. And there's another thing I heard about called Singing for Life. And I wondered, have you heard that tag?
It sounds familiar, yeah.
It was done in Britain, and it was a community group of caregivers and Alzheimer's patients that would go to a church, and they taught it out, like they taught the course to facilitators. So there'd be somebody in the middle with music, and the caregivers would be, you know, it was a social thing.
Okay.
And I haven't heard about it here, and I would love to take it, because it's that great idea, I think, with dementia patients especially. And I'd like to get it together where I am, but my group is so diverse. You know, someone loves jazz and someone loves Bon Jovi. You know, it's a hard thing to not go individual.
Sure.
But I think music really is a key to all of the great bridging in all of these different locations.
Absolutely, yeah. This is, I hear like so much enthusiasm for implementing programs or advocating for music and health. I mean, any ideas anybody has, go for it. I have to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, thank you for coming, Rachel. Yeah, it was my dream to have a music therapy program at Princess Margaret. It took a long time, but it's like, you know, and please contact me at any point if you have questions or ideas or need anything at all, if I can help.
One of the people online has a question.
Great.
Laura would like to know how you prepare for a music therapy session when you don't know if it's going to be improvisation and you don't know what's going to happen. Do you bring a bunch of different instruments? How do you figure out what to do in order to prepare to be improvisorial?
That's a great question. I'll have to, thank you, Laura. It was just terrifying to walk into a room and not know what to expect, and it still can be really nerve-wracking because you don't know what you're walking into as far as people's stories. You might know their medical condition, but you don't always know their history and their background. So what I do, I'll show you. Where am I going here? I guess there's a picture of it here. Yeah. So the keyboard that I have there is on a cart, and that cart I drag it around everywhere I go, and it's full of instruments and it's full of songbooks and pens and papers and whatever I think I might need. So it's very diverse, that particular little cart. So the first thing I do is I have that with me, so that way, and I have a violin on my back, so I offer, what would you prefer out of what you see here? And if someone doesn't have a preference, I might start with the keyboard. The other thing is I like to spend a lot of time talking to the person if I can, just to get to know a bit about them, what their tastes are, and so I take my cues from them in that way. It's tough because, like you said, it could go from Frank Sinatra to, who knows what, like things I haven't even heard of. So if I really can't play something for somebody, I will offer to bring it back the next day, learn it that day. And as far as improvisation, I just try and take my cues from the client and go with their preferences and their tastes. So, great. Are there any other online questions, Susan?
Not right now.
Okay. I'd love to keep going and just hear a bit about you. So, hi.
Hey, my name is Jennifer. I'm a music therapist, but I've just recently come back to school to do my master's in adult education and community development and the collaborative program here.
Fantastic. Did you go to Laurier?
Yeah.
Oh. You look very familiar, I have to say. No, I know it was a different time, but still, yeah. Oh, thank you for coming.
And thank you for presenting your work.
Oh, it's my pleasure, my pleasure. I'm just fresh out of Laurier right now, so I'm kind of missing it. But hi.
Hi, my name is Vicky Barton, and I provide private support for both palliative and Alzheimer's patients in the community. And I've always had an interest in music therapy. I came to this session primarily because of a palliative patient that I journeyed with for 8 months, and the music therapy had such a profound effect not only on her but her family. And therapists actually like you came to her funeral, and the difference in the day, how the day could change when she knew that the music therapist was coming in, was really profound. So I wanted to learn a little bit more from you, so I have. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Gail Houston, and thank you very much. Inspirational. You're so passionate, and you're so lucky to have you in the healthcare system. And although not in such a formal way, I've really seen the power of music with so many residents. And just as we were saying about the lady who knew all the songs, somebody who's been non-responsive, and so then the staff see there's an ability, there's a person inside this person, and it's just really, I've always been convinced it's very powerful. So you know about it, it's just great. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. This is, people's experiences and background. So I don't want to. Everyone, I know it's 1:15. What do you think, Susan?
It's fine. It's up to you.
Well, are there any other questions or any other comments on the stories or?
Could I just make an announcement for those people that have the day open, just to add power of art and community. at St. Michael's Hospital, and it's at 2 o'clock today, and it's free. So if anybody wants, I know there's an occupational therapist who directed this, and she does a lot of work with clients who have psychosocial and mental health issues, and they create, and it's therapy through art. So they produced a documentary. So if anybody's open to, coming, it's 2 today at St. Michael's.
Whereabouts?
It's at the Marshall Lecture the Paul Marshall Lecture Theatre, and it's I think on the main floor of St. Michael's, which is on Bond Street, Queens Station.
Thank you for that.
Just it so shows how the arts are so powerful,
That's so much.
Oh yeah, this is the struggle we're up against now. But there is lots of research coming out of Princess Margaret and other places. So, but you're right, it is a challenge. It really is.
I wanted to ask the woman of Grace if there was an activationist on that board, or is there one in Palliative where you are?
Not formally, no. Not that I know of on the palliative care unit. We have occupational health, physio, psychiatry, psychology, music therapy, nursing, palliative care physicians, spiritual care, social work, and volunteers. Yeah, no, I'm trying to think. I don't think so.
Because I know one of my teachers at George Brown had worked in Palliative with Grace. But I'm not sure exactly what they called her then, or if it was, an activation coordinator. But I know she used music in that, a cassette tape, collecting music of clients, was always one of her, great stories, success stories.
I guess I was curious about to get into the program of music therapy.
Yeah.
You would probably need to be skilled in an instrument. Is that right? To get into the
Is there a
program?
prerequisite? They're not teaching you how to play, right?
Yeah.
No, they're teaching you how to clinically improvise, but the prerequisites generally are an undergraduate in music or an allied field like psychology. If you don't have an undergraduate degree in music, you have to have kind of a similar ability level, give or take. But having said that, I've seen people with varying abilities, but with exceptional musicianship, just really incredible singers or what have you. A primary instrument and a secondary instrument usually. They like to see the people play more than one, and that you can sing in some capacity. And then some general psychology prerequisites as well that you would have in an undergraduate program, intro, developmental, abnormal, that kind of thing. And that's pretty much the qualifications. Yeah. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank
Thank you so much for coming.